Okay, let's dive straight into this explainer and explore how a harsh, relentlessly unfriendly penal colony managed to evolve into one of the world's leading global metropolises. Because before we map out the timeline, we really have to ask ourselves, how on earth could a landscape defined by extreme contradictions and basic survival possibly forge such a modern economic and cultural hub? I mean, the leap from a settlement literally fighting off starvation to a financial powerhouse seems almost impossible, right? So to understand this, we're going to walk through 5 massive shifts in Sydney's identity. Indigenous roots and contact, survival in a penal colony, the gold rush boom, wars in a new nation, and finally, the rise of a global city. Let's get into it. Starting with Section 1, we're looking at Indigenous roots and contact, 50,000 years of coexistence. What we see here is the ultimate clash of worldviews. On one side, you have an ancient, incredibly complex ecosystem that was sustained by indigenous cultures for 50,000 years through careful seasonal movements. And then, on the other side, an empire arriving with a completely different playbook, legally declaring the area an empty land suited only for agricultural exploitation and, well, a massive outdoor prison. Now, what's truly fascinating is that the Eora nation possessed a highly sophisticated socio-political structure. They relied on deep environmental knowledge. They weren't just surviving out there, they had a thriving, finely tuned system. The Eora nation was made up of 7 distinct clans, including the Gaidagal and Barawa. They mapped their entire lives around a highly effective seasonal round itinerary to guarantee food security. They passed down land ownership through patrilineal lines, and they depended heavily on profound kinship ties to share labor. It was an exceptionally well-balanced society. But the historical record shows a devastatingly rapid timeline once that balance was disrupted. In 1770, Captain Cook actually misses the entrance to Sydney Harbor, but claims the territory anyway. Fast forward to 1788, the first fleet sets up camp, and just 2 years later, by 1790, the region is completely fractured by widespread conflict and the incredibly tragic introduction of smallpox, effectively upending that 50,000-year-old equilibrium. Which brings us directly to Part 2. Survival in a penal colony, or the brutal birth of Sydney. The crucial takeaway here is that early Sydney was definitely not some grand, well-planned settlement. It was a grim, day-to-day struggle for survival against an environment they didn't understand. British expectations of a lush, English landscape were totally shattered. You can really see it in this bewildered observation by botanist Sir Joseph Banks. He looked at the local flora and described it as a frightful, bearded fruit. They were completely alien to this ecosystem, and that total lack of understanding nearly doomed the colony right out of the gate. Just look at how desperate conditions became for everyone involved, convicts and guards alike. They tried to farm exactly like they did back in England, but the soil was relentlessly unfriendly. By 1793, things were so bad they had to cut rations by half. We're talking about a pure, desperate fight to stay alive. Convicts were foraging the shores for crabs, they were boiling whatever random fish they could pull from shark nets, and at one point, the entire colony was literally saved by a washed-up blubber whale. It is a wild testament to the sheer raw grit required to simply exist in those early days. Okay, let's shift forward to the 1850s with Section 3, the Gold Rush Boom, Gold, Growth, and Growing Pains. This is the exact moment Sydney's era as merely a prison abruptly ends. Sparked by the gold rush, the city's population violently exploded. It doubled from 40,000 in 1851 to 80,000 by 1854. This massive, sudden influx represents a total paradigm shift for the city. Almost overnight, Sydney wasn't just a place people were forced to go to, it became a place people were absolutely desperate to reach. And this wave of fortune seekers completely altered the city's DNA. Just look at the before and after. Before the 1850s, the population was incredibly rigid, mostly English convicts, military guards, and government officials. Afterward, the floodgates opened to free Anglo-Celtic settlers, German immigrants, Italian shoremen, you name it. Sydney went from a strictly controlled prison hierarchy to a chaotic, bustling, multilingual capitalist boomtown. Now let's dive right into the 20th century, with Section 4, Wars and a New Nation, the crucible of the 20th century. As part of a newly federated Commonwealth, the nation articulated the White Australia policy in 1901. This was an exclusionary piece of legislation designed to restrict non-British arrivals and deliberately engineer a specific demographic makeup. Historically speaking, this policy heavily dictated the social demographics of Sydney and resulted in decades of national isolation before later global waves would ultimately reverse the trend. Then, Sydney's growing prosperity was absolutely shattered by the Great Depression. By 1932, the city faced a staggering 40% unemployment rate. 40%! It filled the city parks with the dispossessed. Imagine almost half of a major city's workforce suddenly without a livelihood. It was a profound economic trauma that tested the social fabric of the city to its absolute breaking point. And if that wasn't enough, the anxiety of World War II literally reached Sydney's shores shortly after. The city had to convert nightclubs into bunkers and become a fortified garrison. Australian troops shipped out in 1939, but by 1941, the arrival of U.S. warships turned Sydney into a massive Allied naval hub. And then, the unthinkable happened in 1942. Midget submarines launched a direct attack inside Sydney Harbor itself. The war was no longer an overseas concept. It was happening right in their own backyard. Following those tumultuous war years, we start to see the emergence of a mature, economically powerful modern city. Welcome to Section 5, Rise of a Global City. Here we finally see the physical manifestation of this massive economic change, as finance capital pushed Sydney's skyline toward the clouds. In 1959, the AMP building went up. At 18 levels, it was Sydney's very first true skyscraper. Now, it might seem kind of modest today, but at the time, it signified a huge shift. It marked the definitive end of agricultural, pastoral dominance over the economy and kicked off the high-rise boom that created the iconic skyline we all recognize today. Simultaneously with the old restrictive policies erased, massive demographic shifts occurred post-World War II. We see an incredible mix of European refugees fleeing a torn continent, Asian immigrants arriving particularly after the Vietnam War, alongside British settlers and migrants from all over the globe. This influx completely transformed the city's food, art, and culture, weaving the vibrant multicultural tapestry that Sydney is famous for today. But to combat the ghosts of its own chaotic urban expansion, the city is now actively planning a green, sustainable future through its strategic plan. They're moving aggressively to reduce energy consumption and emissions, designing a sustainable urban forest to bring nature back into the concrete grid, and ultimately aiming to create a completely post-carbon, walkable city by 2050. It is a bold, necessary vision to correct centuries of environmental hard knocks. So from a starving penal colony to a bustling global metropolis, we want to leave you with this final thought. How will a city forged by such extreme contradictions navigate the future of globalization and climate change? It's a place that has survived famine, booms, depressions, and wars. Its history is absolute proof of incredible adaptability, and that resilience is exactly what it's going to need for the decades to come. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep that curiosity alive, and we'll catch you next time.